In a world where more than 8 billion human lives move with restless motion, there are still houses standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. No neighbours. No easy roads leading to their doors. Nothing protects them except a few thin walls against the ocean, the rock, and the open wind. There is a house standing alone on an island in the middle of the sea. There is a house clinging to a rock in the middle of a river. There are places where a shelter is built on a cliff, where a single storm can cut off every way out. Is this absolute freedom or profound loneliness? Welcome to a journey through the most isolated houses on Earth.
La Jument is not only an offshore lighthouse, but a place where humans try to preserve a sign of life in a sea that can crush everything in an instant. The extremity of this place was carved into history on December 21st, 1989. When photographer Jean Guichard flew past at the exact moment a monstrous storm was hammering the entire tower. At the moment, lighthouse keeper Theodore Malgorn stepped out of the door. A gigantic wave almost as tall as a 10-story building surged in from behind and swallowed the whole lighthouse, leaving only about half a second between life and death. The lighthouse keepers had to avoid looking down at the waves for too long and always invent work to keep their minds occupied, because if the mind slips before reason does, this tower can turn into a deadly trap. Would you dare live here alone to receive $1 million? Standing alone on Iceland's Elodie Island, this white house sits isolated between black vertical cliffs and the violent waves of the North Atlantic. In reality, it was built in 1953 as a simple survival base for puffin hunters. From a distance, the entire island looks like a natural fortress cut off from the world, with no harbor, no roads, and almost no signs of human presence. Even money becomes meaningless here, because the water supply depends entirely on a rainwater collection system connected to the roof. But even if you were brave enough, this challenge would still be impossible because the house remains locked under the strict protection of the local hunting association. Bivaco Bufa de Pereiro is often described as the loneliest house in the world, a title that reflects how the structure nearly disappears into a sheer Dolomites cliff, revealing only a small facade suspended in mid-air. The shelter is embedded inside a natural rock cavity, surrounded on all sides by vertical stone walls, with no conventional walking path leading to it, making it resemble a hidden doorway carved into the mountain. After decades of abandonment and roof collapse caused by avalanches and alpine storms, the site was fully restored in 2022 by Italy's 6th Alpini Regiment as an emergency refuge for mountaineers. Inside, the space is extremely compact, with raw mountain rock forming the walls, fitted only with 12 simple wooden bunk beds and no electricity, running water, or toilet facilities. Reaching the shelter requires advanced climbing skills, including navigating iron ladders bolted directly into vertical rock faces and narrow, exposed ledges. Along the route, climbers must cross the 27-meter Cristallo suspension bridge hanging over a deep abyss, famously featured in the film Cliffhanger, turning access to this refuge into a genuine survival challenge. Capanna Margherita holds the record as the highest building in Europe, standing on Punta Gnifetti within the extreme icy environment of the Alps. Part of the structure extends directly over a deep cliff, creating the impression that the entire building is suspended between clouds and rock. To reach this place, visitors must cross massive glaciers and carefully navigate deep crevasses hidden beneath the snow. Because every supply must be transported by helicopter, even a hot meal here feels rare at such oxygen-poor altitude. The entire building is covered with an outer copper shell that works like a Faraday cage, allowing lightning currents to move around the exterior instead of entering inside. It also serves as a medical research station, where doctors study how the human body reacts to extreme high-altitude conditions. Cliffside Capsule is recognized as the world's first cliff-hanging capsule accommodation, opening in the year 2013 and pioneering the global trend of sleeping, suspended on vertical rock faces. To reach their sleeping pod, guests must climb a via ferrata system of steel rungs and cables drilled directly into the cliff, ascending for roughly 1.5 to 2 hours with no intermediate exit points. There is no elevator or staircase for departure, as the standard way to leave the site is by sliding down a network of 6 zip-line routes that carry the body in controlled freefall across the canyon. Inside the glass capsule, the dry toilet is visually exposed, allowing an unobstructed view straight down hundreds of feet into the abyss during a basic human routine. Cliffside Capsule is among the rare places where extreme adventure travel and full comfort lodging are structurally fused, forcing survival instinct and luxury to coexist in a single suspended space. Tayun Mountain Taoist Temple is praised as the #1 immortal mountain of the Chin-Chu region, a title reflecting its unmatched status in both landscape and Taoist spirituality. At the summit, known as Golden Peak, the Guanyin Hall weighs several tons, yet touches the mountain over an area of only about 65 square feet, with 3 sides opening directly into a bottomless abyss. Remarkably, Ming Dynasty builders used no cement or binding agents, instead carving deep into quartz rock and stacking stone slabs through precise mortise and groove techniques. This flexible joint structure allows microscopic movement that dissipates energy from earthquakes and violent winds, enabling the temple to remain standing for more than 500 years. Positioned at the highest point of the region, the hall functions as a natural lightning rod and has endured countless direct strikes without burning or collapsing, a survival that challenges conventional risk theories. When dense clouds engulf the Qinling Range, the lower slopes vanish from sight, leaving Golden Peak isolated like a small stone island in a sea of white clouds, creating the powerful illusion of a palace floating in the sky. Sphinx Observatory, Jungfraujoch, stands on a narrow rock ridge at an elevation of 11,811 feet between 2 major snow-covered peaks in Switzerland. This structure is linked to Jungfraujoch, home to the highest railway station in Europe and one of the continent's highest permanently staffed research facilities. The surrounding landscape is covered with snow throughout the year, making the site almost separated from the lower valleys below. To reach this place, Visitors do not climb the mountain, but travel by a railway line that passes through the inside of the mountain. From the station inside the rock, a 354-foot elevator carries people to the observatory in about 25 seconds. Sphinx Observatory was completed in 1937 after construction work carried out among snow, avalanches, and harsh, high mountain terrain. Korovai tree houses are extreme tree dwellings in the forests of Papua, where people lift their entire way of life above the ground to survive at heights reaching about 164 feet. The Korovai people do not build on low branches, but lock their homes onto large tree trunks to avoid floods, predators, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, and hostile groups. These multi-ton houses are assembled with vines, forest rattan, and crushed bark, without using nails, screws, or modern steel cables. Even though the entire house is made from flammable palm leaves and dry wood, they still build a clay stove in the middle of the floor for cooking and warmth. The only way up is a single carved tree trunk with footholds just wide enough for half a foot, with no handrail, no safety net, and a surface kept slippery by rainforest rain. Outsiders must travel by riverboat and then walk for days through humid forest, where dangerous insects, unstable weather, and isolated terrain make very few people dare to go there. Living on the ISS is one of the most extreme survival environments humans have ever created for themselves. Would you drink a cup of coffee that was once your own urine? With systems that recycle 93% of liquids from sweat, breath, and wastewater, it becomes a significant psychological challenge, even though the processed water is cleaner than tap water. Using the toilet is also a demanding process, as astronauts must strap themselves in place and rely on vacuum suction to keep waste from floating in microgravity. The most critical challenge is the effect on the human body, as without about 2 hours of daily exercise, bones lose density due to calcium loss through urine, and the heart can shrink because it works less in microgravity. On the ISS, every sip of water and every movement requires constant effort to adapt to conditions beyond Earth. It is a technological achievement, but also an extreme biological environment. Would you dare gamble with your life just to buy a bottle of water at the most inconvenient convenience store on Earth, hanging above a sheer abyss? This tiny shop covers only about 22 square feet, clinging to an almost vertical rock face, like a supply point suspended in mid-air. To reach it, visitors must cross a cable-assisted climbing route, stretching for hundreds of yards, and many people need nearly 1.5 hours to make it to the top. Every morning, the staff carry water and drinks up on their backs because there is no elevator, no transport route, only human effort pressed against the cliff. Since 2018, this place has drawn millions of views and become a symbol of the human drive to conquer extreme heights. Mont Saint-Michel lies off the coast of Normandy in France and began construction in the 8th century when humans transformed a small granite island into a large monastic and fortress complex. The site is unique because tidal changes can turn the entire structure into a completely isolated island within just a few hours. Over time, Benedictine monks and builders expanded the complex with churches, monasteries, Gothic halls, and reinforced defensive structures. The surrounding walls, watchtowers, and drawbridges turned the island into a highly defensible fortress that never fell even during the 100 Years' War. Despite receiving millions of visitors each year, the number of permanent residents on the island today remains only around 30 to 40 people, including monks and a small civilian population. The Mount Fanjing Golden Temple is known as the most dangerous and spectacular cloud temple on the planet. The temple sanctuary rests on the Red Cloud's golden summit, a natural stone spire protruding straight into the sky to a height of about 7,664 feet, equivalent to a massive 770-story building. The two temples are connected to each other by a tiny stone bridge stretched across a narrow fissure at a dizzying height, looking as if it is floating amidst the clouds. To touch the Golden Temple, visitors have no other choice but to hike up about 8,000 steep stone steps. At the most treacherous sections, climbers must cling tightly to iron chains anchored directly into the cliff. This mountain is covered by thick fog and clouds for over 200 days a year, making the stone steps extremely slippery and the slightest mistake during the climb a significant risk. The Drina River House is often described as the loneliest house in the world, standing alone on the top of a narrow rock in the middle of the violent Drina River. Despite its fragile appearance, the small wooden structure has survived for decades against strong currents and frequent floods. It was not built by professional engineers or architects, but constructed in the year 1968 by a group of local youths who wanted a place to rest while swimming. To adapt to the powerful river flow, the house features open gaps beneath the floor, allowing floodwater to pass through instead of pushing against the entire structure. Although it is not an ancient monument, this persistence has turned the house into a modern cultural symbol that attracts thousands of visitors every year. Refuge des Cosmiques hut was built in the 1930s not for climbers, but as a high-altitude physics laboratory dedicated to the study of cosmic rays. Today, reaching the hut from the Aiguille du Midi cable car requires crossing a razor-thin, snowy ridge where a single misstep can mean a fall of several thousand feet into the glacier abyss. The rapid ascent from about 3,300 feet to nearly 12,500 feet in only 20 minutes creates a serious risk of acute altitude sickness, with cases of cerebral or pulmonary edema occurring directly at the hut. The structure stands on solid rock while being surrounded by permanent snowfields and slowly flowing glaciers that constantly reshape the landscape year after year. Despite the thin air and lethal environment, the refuge functions like an improbable high-altitude hotel, serving hot European meals, draft beer, and even offering double bedrooms. Beneath the modern building, remnants of the original laboratory remain, and the French National Center for Scientific Research still operates atmospheric monitoring instruments at this extreme location. Tridrangoviti is considered the most isolated lighthouse in the world, standing on top of a basalt pillar rising about 118 feet above the stormy Atlantic Ocean. Built in 1939, it was once accessible only by climbing the vertical rock face by hand while winds and waves battered the base. The site is also a refuge for puffins and other seabirds nesting in narrow rock crevices where wind speeds can exceed 125 miles per hour. The lighthouse itself is a reinforced concrete cube measuring about 13 feet on each side, designed to withstand extreme weather conditions. Katski Pillar is a single natural limestone monolith about 130 feet tall, located near the town of Chayatura in western Georgia. The site gained global attention because the ruins of an ancient church were found on its summit after centuries without access, first reached by climbers in 1944. Research confirms that the structure on the top was built around the 9th or 10th century on a surface area of only about 1,600 square feet. Within this extremely limited space stands a small monastic complex consisting of a church, a crypt, a wine cellar, and surrounding walls. The pillar rises vertically and remains completely isolated from the ground, long leaving unanswered how construction materials were transported to the summit. Katska Pillar represents the stylite tradition of monastic isolation, and today the only access is a vertical metal ladder restricted exclusively to male monks. Panagia Hozoviotissa is the second oldest monastery in Greece, a singular hanging wonder anchored directly into a sheer cliff on the island of Amorgos at an elevation of about 984 feet above the Aegean Sea. The 8-story structure defies logic with a length of roughly 131 feet, while sections of its width narrow to only about 16 feet, merging almost seamlessly with the vertical rock face. The monastery has remained continuously active for nearly 1,000 years and is currently maintained by only 3 monks living in isolation amid ocean winds and extreme terrain. According to tradition, the entire structure was built to protect a sacred icon, believed to have drifted from Palestine aboard an unmanned vessel to escape destruction. To reach the monastery, visitors must climb more than 300 steep stone steps, leading to a low doorway that forces everyone to bow upon entry. An iron chisel, left by an 11th century builder, remained embedded in the cliff and suspended at this height for over 900 years, before falling in the year 1956. Sea forts once formed an offshore defensive line protecting Britain during World War II, but later became the foundation for the self-proclaimed micronation known as the Principality of Sealand. After the British military withdrew in the 1960s, the forts were quickly abandoned and turned into idle bases for pirate radio stations such as Radio Caroline and Screaming Lord Sutch, broadcasting illegally deep into the United Kingdom. The army forts designed by engineer Guy Maunsell resemble giant three-legged war machines, often compared to the tripods from the novel War of the Worlds. Rather than standing alone, complexes like Red Sands and Shivering Sands were arranged as clusters of 7 steel towers linked by narrow, suspended walkways. And today, boat tours departing from Whitstable or Herne Bay allow visitors to observe these massive structures as they are slowly eroded by salt and time. San Juan de Gaztelugatixi is a monastery from the 10th century, built atop a cone-shaped rocky island. The structure stands dozens of feet above sea level at the heart of the Bay of Biscay, where powerful Atlantic waves repeatedly crash into the sheer cliffs below. Reaching the monastery requires climbing 241 steep and narrow stone steps, fully exposed to strong winds that can surge directly from the ocean. According to local tradition, once visitors reach the church, they must ring the bell exactly 3 times to ward off evil spirits and bring good fortune. Over more than 1,000 years, the site has survived fires, pirate attacks, and constant salt erosion, demonstrating extraordinary stone-anchored construction techniques. Bishop Rock is the kind of place that makes it hard to believe humans still tried to build an entire lighthouse in the middle of the ocean on a rock with barely enough room to stand. This rock lies in the Atlantic Ocean and is recognized by Guinness as the world's smallest island, with a man-made structure almost just large enough to support a granite tower rising 161 feet high. It took a full 7 years for brave workers to complete the current stone tower while clinging to the site in the middle of violent waves. Even after being built from enormous granite blocks and reinforced again later, this place has never truly been calm. Lighthouse keepers said that whenever storms arrived, they could feel the entire tower shaking after each earth-shaking blow from the sea. Masada Fortress stands atop a rocky mesa, approximately 1,480 feet above the Dead Sea, encircled by sheer cliffs that form a nearly impenetrable stronghold. A system of 12 massive cisterns carved deep into Masada's rock face could store millions of gallons of rainwater from flash floods, proving highly effective in the arid desert environment. The Roman army constructed a colossal ramp of earth and stone to access Masada, a military engineering feat that enabled siege engines and soldiers to reach the summit. During the siege of 72 to 73 CE, nearly 960 Jewish inhabitants at Masada reportedly committed mass suicide to avoid capture by the Roman forces. Only 2 women and 5 children survived. Archaeologists discovered 11 inscribed pottery shards, one bearing the name Ben Yair, potentially linked to the ritual of drawing lots to select those who would carry out the killings and suicides as described by Josephus. Yet archaeology has found very few human remains at Masada and no communal burial pits, raising questions about the legend's precise veracity. Predjama Castle in Slovenia is the largest cave castle in the world, constructed directly into the mouth of a limestone cave on a vertical cliff rising 403 feet. The entire rear structure of Predjama Castle relies on a single limestone rock mass with ceilings and pillars formed by natural stalactite formations. The cave system behind Predjama Castle extends for several miles, creating an underground tunnel network connected to the exterior of the cliff. This underground network was used to transport food and supplies during periods of siege. Modern access to Predjama Castle uses a drawbridge, while the original entrances were positioned higher on the cliff to restrict direct access. Large bat colonies inhabit the unrestored cave sections within Predjama Castle as a stable long-term habitat. Clinging defiantly to a sheer cliff at 900 meters high, Ostrog Monastery appears more like an impossible illusion suspended in the sky than a structure built by humans. Right on the hard, rocky balcony, A grapevine has lived and borne fruit for centuries, despite having no soil to grow, in which locals believe is a miracle and visitors cannot explain. During World War II, a Nazi bomb hit the monastery, but strangely, it did not explode and instead broke in half. So Ostrog Monastery remains intact to this day. The monks here did not build walls, but used the cave's rock face as the walls, painting directly onto the stone and creating narrow, deep spaces that make visitors feel like they are entering the heart of a mountain. The path leading up to Ostrog Monastery is steep with deep cliffs on both sides. Yet barefoot pilgrims still make the journey every year, creating a scene that many find hard to believe belongs to the 21st century. Laojian Mountain is a majestic sanctuary located at an elevation of 7,218 feet, holding the record for the highest gold-plated architectural complex in China. The most magnificent highlight features gilded bronze pavilions rising from jagged stone peaks, seemingly suspended amidst a sea of white clouds. To access this spiritual space, visitors must push their physical limits on precarious cliffs and thousands of steep stairs. The sensation of looking down into the deep abyss right beneath your feet is certainly a terrifying experience for those afraid of heights. At this altitude, the weather changes extremely fast, especially in winter, when the temperature drops to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, making the frozen pathways incredibly dangerous. Despite this, the contrast between the pristine white snow and the regal golden hue of the architecture still creates a surreal visual masterpiece. Meteora is a monastery complex holding the record for one of the world's most dramatic spiritual structures on steep rock cliffs, revealing the extreme isolation humans once accepted. Seen from the valley below, the monasteries look like castles suspended among clouds, placed on sandstone pillars so high that raiders could almost never reach them. This complex was built in the 14th century, when monks needed a refuge separated from the violence and danger below. For many centuries, Meteora had no fixed road upward, forcing people to climb by rope ladders, pulleys, and hanging baskets along the cliffs. A single broken rope could mean death, but construction continued and created shelters that seemed almost impossible on stone. The last monk was pulled up by basket in 1950, and today, although stairs exist, Meteora's original sense of isolation remains clearly visible. Paro Taktsang has almost no flat courtyard, but clings to a vertical cliff like a monastery suspended among the mountains and forests of Bhutan. The complex sits at about 10,240 feet, fixed against an almost vertical rock wall and completely beyond the reach of motorized vehicles. The route to the monastery forces pilgrims to walk through dense pine forest, narrow steps, and cliffside sections where wheels have no practical meaning. The whole complex includes 4 main temples, arranged on terrain so steep that there is almost no wide open space for people to stop for long. In winter, high mountain fog and thin snow often cover the temple roofs, the cliff face, and the prayer flags torn by wind along the path. In 1998, a fire destroyed much of the main structure, killed 1 monk, and caused many ancient relics to disappear. Ogashima functions like a refuge, placed directly inside an active geological system that has never truly gone dormant in the Pacific Ocean. This island is not only remote from the mainland, but the entire community lives within a volcanic crater, which is further enclosed by steep walls rising about 650 to 1,300 feet as part of a much larger outer caldera. In 1785, when the Tenmei volcano erupted, around 327 residents were trapped between ash and lava, turning the island into a sealed environment with no easy escape. Even today, that sense of isolation has not disappeared, as helicopters remain the only reliable access, operating just 1 flight per day with 9 seats and frequently cancelled due to fog or strong winds. For the people living here, waiting for a flight when a family member on the mainland is critically ill is not just a delay, it becomes a prolonged psychological strain. And for those newly assigned to work on the island, The confined space and the closed ring of ocean surrounding Aogashima can quickly turn quietness into a feeling of confinement. Shuangta Mountain in Chengdi holds the record for two ancient structures that are completely isolated, with 2,000-year-old stone towers standing on top of sheer rock pillars with no direct access route. The two stone columns rise more than 131 feet, with nearly vertical walls and a narrow base that swells toward the top, creating an unusual distribution of weight that has still remained stable through millions of years of weathering. In the 10th century, the Khitan transported building materials to this height and constructed two blue brick towers without any mechanical lifting system, showing a level of organization and engineering that exceeded the extreme limits of the terrain. The only path that may once have existed is believed to have been stone steps carved into the cliff, but erosion erased them completely, turning the summit into a space cut off from all normal human activity. Haid al-Jazil is known as the most isolated mud fortress on the planet, a settlement positioned on top of a monolithic rock rising about 492 feet with nearly vertical sides. The entire village is placed on the limited surface of this rock, comparable to situating a residential area at the height of a 50-story building within a dry desert environment. Structures here are built from mud bricks and straw, maintaining structural stability for centuries without the use of modern materials such as steel or cement. Because there is no water source on the summit, residents must descend to the valley to collect water and carry it back up under outdoor temperatures that can approach 122 degrees Fahrenheit. No vehicle roads exist, and access depends entirely on narrow and steep stone steps carved into the mountain's slope. The houses are built entirely of stone, with bedroom windows looking straight down into space, transforming every daily activity into an extreme, daring performance. Skellig Michael takes its name from the Gaelic Gaelig Michil, meaning Michael's Rock, identifying it as a remote island off the coast. This isolated island served as a Christian monastic retreat for centuries, beginning in the 6th century, establishing one of Europe's oldest surviving communities. Monks painstakingly carved approximately 600 stone steps into the cliff face, leading to the ancient monastery built with remarkable dry stone techniques. This method involved precisely stacking stones by hand without mortar, allowing the structures to endure for over 1,400 years. Mount Popa is an extinct volcano rising dramatically from the arid plains of central Myanmar, not far from the ancient city of Bagan. This mountain is not a typical landmass, but a steep limestone plug, almost entirely separate from the surrounding terrain, resembling a giant tower emerging from the earth. Perched atop this majestic rock formation, a sacred monastery stands, creating a breathtaking and imposing sight. It is revered as the sacred home of the 37 supreme Nat spirits within Myanmar's traditional folk beliefs, making it a primary pilgrimage destination for the local populace. To reach the temples and monastery at the summit, visitors must ascend over 700 steps, and along the climb, they frequently encounter numerous long-tailed macaques inhabiting the area. The Nat belief at Mount Popa has deeply integrated into the spiritual life and culture of Myanmar over many centuries, coexisting alongside Buddhism. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault is constructed 120 meters deep inside a rocky mountain, situated over 130 meters above sea level to ensure safety from all sea level rise scenarios. Temperatures inside the vault are naturally maintained at approximately 26 to 27 degrees Fahrenheit by surrounding permafrost, allowing seeds to be preserved even if artificial cooling systems fail. With the capacity to store up to 4.5 million crop varieties, totaling about 2.5 billion individual seeds, its design withstands major disasters like earthquakes, volcanoes, nuclear radiation, and meteor impacts. In 2015, seeds were withdrawn for the first and only time to restore a collection damaged by a conflict elsewhere. However, deposited seeds remain the property of their sending entities, with the vault serving solely for secure storage. There are villages on Earth that are isolated not because of distance, but because the terrain itself makes them almost impossible to reach. They stand on cliffs, remote islands, or inside snow-covered valleys, where entering and leaving the village is always limited by rugged terrain. Some can only be reached by boat, narrow cliffside trails, or hours of travel through ice and snow. But people still live there, turning isolation into an advantage that helps preserve a peaceful way of life. They build homes on rock, farm on mountain slopes, and maintain daily life in places where isolation is not an exception, but part of everyday existence. Gasadalur, known as the loneliest village in the Faroe Islands, was once the last settlement in the archipelago connected to the outside world by road. Although it sits beside the open ocean, the village is trapped behind steep cliffs that made boat access almost impossible for centuries. For generations, residents had to cross a dangerous mountain pass with nearly vertical slopes to receive food, supplies, and letters from the outside world. The isolation became so extreme that the population once dropped below 20 people, and visitors could stay for weeks without seeing a stranger. In 2004, a tunnel carved through the mountain finally ended the village's long isolation from the rest of the Faroe Islands. Today, cars can reach Gasadalur, but the village still preserves the feeling of complete solitude between towering cliffs and the cold North Atlantic Ocean. Tliaratinsky is often called Russia's ice fortress, where nearly 70% of its villages are officially classified by the government as extremely difficult to access. Despite the harsh terrain, local residents continue building homes directly onto steep cliff faces, and even after devastating fires, they rebuild in the exact same locations instead of leaving. Stone villages hanging from opposite mountain slopes can communicate by shouting across the canyon, yet meeting each other in person still requires hours of walking through winding mountain paths. Transportation in Tliaratinsky almost completely rejects automobiles because most routes are nothing more than narrow, slippery trails carved along the edges of deep ravines. To reach these remote settlements, people are often forced to travel on foot or ride donkeys and horses across dangerous mountain tracks. Because the region lies near a sensitive border zone, every visitor who wants to enter must pass security inspections and obtain a special permit from Russian authorities. How would you live if the moment you stepped outside your home, you faced the deep ocean in a strange village without a single inch of solid ground? This village was founded by nomadic fishermen who were banned from owning land, forcing them to build homes and survive directly above the sea. More than 1,000 residents expanded the community for decades using wooden walkways and stilt houses that constantly battled tropical storms and saltwater corrosion. In the middle of endless ocean water, they still created a complete community centered around a golden-domed mosque rising above the horizon. Even without any flat land, the villagers built a unique floating soccer field that later became one of Southeast Asia's most inspiring symbols. From an isolated and poor fishing village, this place slowly transformed into a destination that attracts thousands of curious visitors every day. Chukotka is the only place on Earth where a single glance can place one side of your view in the past, while the other already exists in the future. If you stand on the coast of Chukotka on a Monday afternoon, you can look across the Bering Strait toward Alaska, where it is still Sunday, because the international dateline separates the two regions. Because it sits beside American territory, the region is controlled so strictly that even Russian citizens need special security permits before they are allowed to enter. Chukotka is nearly sealed off by nature for 10 months each year, as temperatures regularly fall below -50 degrees Fahrenheit, and heavy snowstorms cancel flights for weeks at a time. Long-term isolation and extreme living costs caused the local economy to collapse rapidly after 1991. Chukotka eventually lost nearly 2/3 of its population, as desperate residents sold their homes cheaply just to afford a one-way plane ticket to Moscow. Meteora is a monastery complex holding the record for one of the world's most dramatic spiritual structures on steep rock cliffs, revealing the extreme isolation humans once accepted. Seen from the valley below, the monasteries look like castles suspended among clouds, placed on sandstone pillars so high that raiders could almost never reach them. This complex was built in the 14th century when monks needed a refuge separated from the violence and danger below. For many centuries, Meteora had no fixed road upward, forcing people to climb by rope ladders, pulleys, and hanging baskets along the cliffs. A single broken rope could mean death, but construction continued and created shelters that seemed almost impossible on stone. The last monk was pulled up by basket in 1950, and today, although stairs exist, Meteora's original sense of isolation remains clearly visible. Known as the Arctic Fortress, Rainer once held the record as the longest road isolated settlement in northern Europe, surrounded by oceans and steep mountains. The village is famous for its red wooden cabins standing beside icy waters, backed by sharp granite peaks rising from the sea like enormous walls. For centuries, the extreme mountain terrain made road construction seem like engineering suicide, forcing residents to depend entirely on the ocean for survival. Locals constantly faced violent North Atlantic storms and endured winters covered in darkness for several continuous months each year. Despite its small size and isolation, Rain became a thriving trading center in 1743 through Norway's growing seafood export industry. Today, the village has finally broken its centuries of isolation through a symbolic network of bridges and undersea tunnels connecting it to the mainland. Known as the Floating Fortress, Bonifacio is a cliff complex about 230 feet high that was never conquered from the sea in French history. Constant gusts of wind have carved the limestone into smooth curves, making the cliff face look like giant streams of candle wax frozen in motion. The only route down to the sea is a staircase of 187 steep and narrow steps cut directly into the vertical rock wall. To stop pirates, many old houses had no doors at ground level and used rope ladders lowered from balconies before being pulled back inside. Inside the citadel, the stone alleys are so narrow that people in opposite houses can almost shake hands through their windows, creating a natural defensive maze. Heavy stone houses stand close to the cliff edge, while the rock base below is slowly eroded by the ocean each day, creating a fear that can stop anyone with a weak heart. Imagine climbing 2,556 steep steps every single day just to return home. And that is exactly what happens in ordinary life at Atulia village. The village sits on a rocky ledge about 4,600 feet high in the mountains of Sichuan, almost completely separated from normal transportation routes. From the Megu River Valley, Atulia appears only as a narrow crack where dark wooden houses cling directly to towering grey cliffs. For centuries, a system of 17 wooden sky ladders made from timber and vines served as the village's only connection to the world below. Because no road could reach the settlement, residents once tied goods onto their backs and climbed down the cliff by a hand to sell them outside the mountain. Children here grew up on narrow ledges beside deep drops, where the ability to keep balance developed long before they learned how to read or write. Korovai tree houses are extreme tree dwellings in the forests of Papua, where people lift their entire way of life above the ground to survive at heights reaching about 164 feet. The Korovai people do not build on low branches, but lock their homes onto large tree trunks to avoid floods, predators, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, and hostile groups. These multi-ton houses are assembled with vines, forest rattan, and crushed bark, without using nails, screws, or modern steel cables. Even though the entire house is made from flammable palm leaves and dry wood, they still build a clay stove in the middle of the floor for cooking and warmth. The only way up is a single carved tree trunk with footholds just wide enough for half a foot, with no handrail, no safety net, and a surface kept slippery by rainforest rain. Outsiders must travel by riverboat and then walk for days through humid forest, where dangerous insects, unstable weather, and isolated terrain make very few people dare to go there. existing on a vertical cliff like a wooden megacity suspended inside a canyon. Wangxian Valley almost rejects every normal form of land. The site was built on the remains of an abandoned granite quarry, then revived into an architectural complex attached tightly to steep rock walls. With no streets or flat open ground, the wooden houses are bound together by a network of walkways, staircases, and corridors hanging along the cliff. From a distance, they resemble giant bird nests hidden inside the folds of the canyon, where fog is trapped by the deep and narrow terrain. When night falls, tens of thousands of lanterns along the cliff light up at once, turning the entire valley into a vertical maze of light. While walking through the area, visitors move between cold rock, deep drops, waterfalls, and phone signals that can easily be blocked by the surrounding cliffs. At more than 6,800 feet above sea level in the Caucasus Mountains, Ushguli survives like a village frozen in the 9th century within the remote mountains of Georgia. Against the cold sky, dozens of medieval stone towers rise above the valley like giant forgotten chess pieces standing in isolation. These towers were not built for beauty, but served as defensive fortresses, protecting families from avalanches and enemy attacks in the past. During 6 months of winter, snowstorms can completely block the only road into the village, turning Ushguli into a frozen bubble, separated from the outside world. This long isolation helped preserve the ancient Svan culture and a rare language that still has no written alphabet. Today, the 4-day trekking route from Mestia to Ushguli has turned the village into a famous destination for adventure travelers from around the world. Paro Taktsang has almost no flat courtyard, but clings to a vertical cliff like a monastery suspended among the mountains and forests of Bhutan. The complex sits at about 10,240 feet, fixed against an almost vertical rock wall and completely beyond the reach of motorized vehicles. The route to the monastery forces pilgrims to walk through dense pine forest, narrow steps, and cliffside sections where wheels have no practical meaning. The whole complex includes 4 main temples, arranged on terrain so steep that there is almost no wide open space for people to stop for long. In winter, high mountain fog and thin snow often cover the temple roofs, the cliff face, and the prayer flags torn by wind along the path. In 1998, a fire destroyed much of the main structure, killed 1 monk, and caused many ancient relics to disappear. Longyearbyen is the capital of the Svalbard archipelago and the northernmost permanently inhabited settlement on Earth. This is a land that rejects death because the frozen ground is so cold that bodies can barely decompose, forcing seriously ill residents to leave the island. Polar bears outnumber humans here, and anyone leaving the safe zone of town is strongly advised to carry a loaded rifle for protection. During 4 months of winter, Longyearbyen remains in complete darkness and extreme cold as the sun never rises above the horizon. The settlement is so isolated that no roads connect it to the outside world or even nearby communities across the Arctic region. Hidden deep beneath the frozen mountains of Longyearbyen is the famous Doomsday Vault, where millions of seeds are stored to protect humanity's future food supply during global disasters. Vernatsa proudly holds the reputation of being one of the most untouched fairy tale villages in the world because it completely rejected modern road systems. The village is trapped inside a steep, rocky fracture with 3 sides surrounded by towering cliffs, while the remaining side opens directly toward the vast Mediterranean Sea. All paved roads end far above the hills, permanently banning cars from Vernadza and forcing both residents and visitors to carry their luggage down on foot. Inside the village, almost no flat ground exists because the pathways form a maze of narrow stone stairways so steep that large rolling suitcases become nearly useless. The fastest entrance into Vernadza is a cramped railway station hidden between 2 dark tunnels carved directly through the dangerous coastal mountains. On the cliffs surrounding the village, locals even built narrow miniature rail systems hanging near the edge to transport grapes down from the terraced vineyards instead of carrying them by foot. Hidden at an elevation of nearly 4,000 feet, Weiribo is an isolated fortress village made up of only 7 ancient houses deep within the mountains. These massive structures were built entirely from bamboo and palm fiber without using a single metal piece or iron nail. Fewer than 200 people live here, completely separated from electrical grids and modern transportation systems. The only way to reach Weiribo is a continuous 4-hour trek through dense tropical forest and steep mountain terrain. Even a single heavy rainstorm can completely block the narrow trail with mud and falling debris from the surrounding jungle. This extreme isolation has forced the community to survive through full self-sufficiency while preserving a traditional way of life that has remained nearly unchanged for centuries. Perched beside a deep abyss, Karimabad is an isolated oasis where many people once lived their entire lives without seeing the outside world. The village is surrounded by towering ice-covered mountains rising more than 23,000 feet high, forming a natural fortress separated from the modern world. Before paved roads existed, the only entrance was a series of thin wooden planks attached to vertical cliffs where one mistake could send someone falling into the ravine below. Thousands of years of isolation helped create a unique language that has no clear connection to any other known language on Earth. During winter, heavy snow and frequent landslides can seal Karimabad inside a frozen barrier for months at a time. To survive these extreme conditions, residents rely on melted glacier water and underground storage filled with dried meat, chestnuts, and apricots. Perched on a 164-foot vertical volcanic cliff, Castel Follet de la Roca is considered one of the most unconquerable villages in Spain. This narrow rock platform formed after thousands of years of river erosion, carved through ancient volcanic remains, and created a natural refuge above deep ravines. Although the village covers less than half a square mile, it remains packed with stone houses and a community that has survived here for centuries. The rocky surface is so narrow that the village almost has only one main street, while the back of many homes ends directly at a sheer cliff. For centuries, this vertical isolation worked as both a natural fortress and a dangerous environment where even small mistakes could become disastrous. Local residents used volcanic stone to build their homes, making Castel Follet appear like a living structure growing directly from the side of the cliff. Murren does not sit on a road, but clings to the edge of the Alps, like a village placed by mistake in mid-air. The village sits at about 5,410 feet on a steep mountain slope and has no paved road connecting it directly to the valley floor. Despite the development of the 21st century, Murren still rejects cars and depends on cable cars, a mountain railway, and the small train route from Grutschalp. Essential supplies such as building bricks, heating oil, and drinking water must be carried up through aerial transport systems or mountain railways. In winter, the low wooden rooftops are almost buried under snow, leaving only lit windows and narrow paths cut through thick white masses. When severe weather stops the cable cars, life in Murren contracts around the station, supply areas, and internal walking routes inside the village. Itokortormiit is not an ordinary village, but resembles a guard post, standing alone in a nearly boundless world of ice and snow. It is considered one of the most remote settlements in the Western Hemisphere, located hundreds of miles from the nearest communities and almost separated from the rest of Greenland. The village sits at the mouth of the world's largest fjord system, where houses painted in primary colors stand out against cold rock, white snow, and frozen sea. For about 9 months each year, the frozen ocean becomes the main travel route for dog sleds and snowmobiles, almost completely replacing the role of cars. Supplies depend on 1 or 2 ice-breaking ships each year during the very short summer season. With no large-scale agriculture or developed industry, life here still depends heavily on hunting wild animals across fractured ice. Nueva Venecia is Colombia's forgotten refuge, a floating village isolated from the mainland in the middle of the Santa Marta marshlands, like a tiny invisible dot on the map. Reaching this hidden world requires more than 1 hour by boat through a maze of mangrove forests surrounded by almost complete silence. The residents live in a way that nearly avoids touching land, traveling only by small boats along narrow canals between wooden homes built above the water. For years, the village used the vast water around it as a natural fortress to remain separated from the outside world. Although it was abandoned after a violent tragedy in 2000, the residents later returned to rebuild their isolated life deep within the swamp. The whitewashed villages of Santorini appear to cling defiantly to the rim of a volcanic crater and cliffs rising straight from the ocean. This postcard-like landscape is actually the remnant of one of the most violent eruptions in Mediterranean history. Around 3,600 years ago, a fiery catastrophe blew the island apart, creating the flooded caldera and isolated terrain seen today. Beneath that calm surface, the volcanic system remains active, with its most recent eruption occurring in 1950. Behind the romantic image, every sunset photograph here is actually a view aimed directly toward a submerged volcanic crater in the sea. Anyone who steps onto Santorini must silently accept one rule: they are walking on the roof of a volcano that can awaken at any time. Perched is known as a gigantic Roman arena made of green rice terraces, where the concept of wheels has almost never existed for more than 20 centuries in the remote mountains of the Philippines. Unlike ordinary rice fields, tens of thousands of terraces here curve into perfect semicircles carved deeply into the mountainside like a massive handmade structure. Local people believe that if every stone terrace wall were dismantled and connected together, they could wrap around the earth more than 1.5 times. To survive thousands of years of heavy rain and landslides, the terraces are reinforced with countless tightly fitted stones without concrete or modern machinery. The only pathways connecting homes are slippery stone terrace edges barely wide enough for a single human footstep. Because Perched has no paved roads for vehicles, every journey into the village depends almost entirely on narrow forest trails crossing steep mountain terrain. Kandavan is a gigantic stone anthill hidden in the mountains of Iran, where people have sealed themselves inside rock cores for more than 7 centuries in order to survive. Hundreds of cone-shaped rock towers rising from about 30 feet to more than 130 feet stand tightly together on steep hillsides, blending almost perfectly with the surrounding gray-brown mountains. From a distance, the village resembles a massive cluster of stone beehives rising into the sky, creating the unsettling feeling of a crowded place that remains completely silent. In the 13th century, refugees fleeing the massacres of the Mongol invasions carved directly into the rock formations to hide and eventually turned them into permanent homes. On nights when snowstorms block every path, people and livestock survive together inside the freezing stone chambers by sharing body heat in the most primitive way possible. Iquitos is the world's largest city unreachable by road, locked between giant rivers and the dense Amazon rainforest of Peru. After leaving the city by boat for about 15 minutes, the rainforest rises into a dark and thick wall of trees that almost blocks every direction of land expansion. Outsiders can reach Iquitos fastest by plane or by traveling for several days by boat along the Amazon River. Along the water's edge, thousands of wooden houses stand on tall stilts or rest on floating rafts to adapt to flood seasons that can raise water levels by about 33 feet. Life here depends heavily on rivers, and the giant perched fish, which can reach about 10 feet long and weigh around 440 pounds, is one of the most important food sources. When floodwater rises close to metal rooftops, residents must grow used to swimming moving by small boat and living on floating wooden platforms above the muddy Amazon water. Did you know Monemvasia hides a vibrant city behind a barren rock formation that deceived humanity for centuries? This massive rock was once connected to the mainland until a powerful earthquake in 375 AD split it away into the Mediterranean Sea. True to its name, meaning single entrance, the entire city can only be accessed through one tunnel, carved directly through the cliff walls. Inside the stone settlement is a maze of narrow, winding alleys that were intentionally designed to confuse pirates and make ambushes easier during attacks. During long sieges, medieval residents survived by farming on hidden terraces and storing rainwater among the dry, rocky slopes. Even today, Monemvasia rejects modern vehicles, forcing all goods and construction materials to be transported by human labor or pack donkeys. Mao Sinram is the wettest place on Earth, where non-stop rain, lasting for months, creates a wall of water that almost traps the entire village. The settlement sits on the Khasi Hills at about 4,600 feet above sea level and faces directly toward the Bay of Bengal, forcing moisture-filled clouds into the mountains. Average yearly rainfall can exceed 470 inches, enough to turn the air into dense fog and erase visibility for days at a time. Ordinary raincoats and umbrellas are nearly useless, so residents use Nup, a shield woven from bamboo and banana leaves that covers the head and back during storms. Extreme humidity causes metal to rust quickly, concrete to become coated in slippery moss, and fabric or leather clothing to grow mold after only one night. From June to August, roads dissolve into mud and the fog becomes so thick that Mawsynram is almost sealed off from the rest of India. Welcome to Lamayuru, an untouchable land hidden deep in the Himalayas, where the terrain is not meant for the faint-hearted or those afraid of heights. The entire settlement and its monasteries are built along the edges of vertical cliffs, making them look as if they could slide into the abyss at any moment when viewed from below. Houses here are handmade from mud and stone, with colors that blend so closely into the mountainside that they are difficult to separate from natural rock walls at a distance. To reach this place, visitors must cross steep, narrow, winding mountain passes that run beside deep ravines without safety barriers. In winter, temperatures can fall to -22 degrees Fahrenheit, while snow and ice block the passes and cut the village off from the outside world for months. Because of this extreme isolation, Lamayuru was once seen as a place of crime exemption in history, where the terrain was so difficult that the law could hardly reach it. Hutuan village may be the closest answer to the theory of what the world would look like if humans disappeared from Earth. The village was abandoned because all movement depended on a maze of narrow stone stairways winding along the hillside, almost completely rejecting the use of cars. Nature did not need centuries to reclaim this place, because in less than 30 years after the final migration of the late 1990s, vines and wild ferns broke through windows, pierced rooftops, and covered the stone walls. From a distance, Hutuan almost disappears beneath a dense green layer, leaving only a few old rooftops and dark windows exposed on the mountainside. Hutuan was almost forgotten until 2015, when rising visitor numbers forced authorities to install barriers and create a limited sightseeing route. Although most residents left, a few elderly people once stayed behind or returned to sell drinks and guide visitors through the abandoned village. Sumba Traditional Village is a village frozen in time, where local people still choose a way of life that resembles the Stone Age in the 21st century. To remain separated from the modern world, the villages cling to steep hilltops above empty grasslands where paved roads are almost absent. The village structure uses almost no industrial materials because the huge pointed houses are built with wooden pegs and forest rattan without iron nails. Local people still reject modern machines when they drag stone tombs weighing dozens of tons by hand and with ropes woven from tree bark. The closed spiritual world is clear when living people eat, sleep, and carry out daily life directly on the tops of gigantic stone graves in the village yard. Here, paper money is almost meaningless because power belongs to those who own buffalo herds, hundreds of horses, and ancient bronze gongs. Wadi Rum Camp holds the record as the most isolated lodging area in Jordan, hidden deep inside the Valley of the Moon, a landscape considered the most realistic version of Mars on Earth. Nature here creates a harsh wall of endless red sand, with no paved road for even 1 foot, and daily temperature swings from freezing cold to burning heat. Because ordinary cars cannot drive deep into the desert, visitors can only reach the camps by high-clearance local jeep or by camel. Isolation forces clean water to be pumped from deep underground sources or carried in from outside, so water use must remain careful to protect the ecosystem. Even in these severe conditions, the camps range from simple eco-tents to 5-star desert lodging. Surrounded by silent red sand on every side, many luxury camps still include air conditioning, Wi-Fi, jacuzzi tubs, and 24-hour room service.
Some places have been abandoned for years, and the reason people left them behind is never simple. Many of them have witnessed dark history, strange events, or dangers serious enough to make them places no one wants to step into. Doors were shut. Machines stopped running. Streets fell silent. But inside, the danger still remains. Some places are contaminated with radiation. Some still hold toxic chemicals. In some places, nature has swallowed entire cities. Yet what humans left behind has never truly disappeared. These places are not frightening simply because they are abandoned. They are frightening because real dangers still remain inside. Dangers no one should ever underestimate. Join us as we explore the most dangerous abandoned places in the world, where the past is still trapped inside forgotten ruins. Poveglia is not just an abandoned island, it is a massive mass grave in the Venetian lagoon. During the plague outbreaks, it became a brutal quarantine zone where anyone showing symptoms was sent to wait for death. An estimated 160,000 victims died on the island in isolation and pain. The horror of Poveglia does not come only from collapsing buildings, but from the very ground beneath your feet. Many researchers claim that more than half of the island's soil is made of human ashes from mass cremations. Later, the island's psychiatric hospital and stories of cruel experiments on human brains made Poveglia even heavier. In 1968, the hospital closed and the island was abandoned forever. Pyramiden is the world's northernmost ghost town, home to the farthest statue of Lenin on Earth and a frozen time capsule from the Soviet era. Deep inside the Arctic Circle on the Svalbard archipelago, it was once a thriving Soviet coal mining community built as an ideal model in the ice. But in 1998, the town was abandoned within only a few months, leaving behind libraries full of books, intact homes and pianos resting in the cold. The danger at Pyramiden comes not only from temperatures below minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but also from polar bears that often roam around the abandoned buildings searching for food. With no road access and very limited communication, any accident here can become extremely difficult to handle. The Murni Diamond Mine is the second largest man-made pit in the world and is known as a deadly no-fly zone. With a diameter of about 3,937 feet, the pit can create air vortices and sudden pressure changes, forcing helicopters to avoid flying over it. Reports of accidents linked to this phenomenon have made Murni a dangerous place for many pilots. However, the mine was abandoned because open pit mining stopped in 2001, when trucks could no longer move safely along the spiral roads to the bottom. Underground mining also ended in 2017 after a major flood broke through the tunnels and killed 8 miners. Today, Myrney is an abandoned trap filled with freezing water and methane gas accumulated underground. Perched on the vertical cliffs of Mount Yuntai in Guizhou, the Shibing wooden house looks like a visual effects scene, but it is completely real. The structure hangs hundreds of feet above the ground, with almost no solid foundation clearly visible beneath it. This is not an ancient village, but a mysterious, private structure built by hermits seeking absolute isolation. However, the harsh environment, lack of basic utilities, and difficulty of delivering supplies eventually caused the place to be abandoned. After years of wind and storms, the fragile wooden structure is slowly rotting and weakening. With no guardrails or safe access path, any attempt to enter this hanging house could lead to serious danger. Standing alone at the mouth of the River Thames, the Red Sands forts look like a giant steel army from a science fiction movie. Built during World War II to defend against German air attacks, these structures once housed hundreds of soldiers far out at sea. After being abandoned in the 1950s, they gradually became isolated masses of rusting steel surrounded by water and wind. Nearly a century of exposure to salt water and powerful storms has severely weakened the fort's steel framework. The walkways connecting the towers can fail at any time, sending anyone crossing them into the swirling waters below. Reaching the forts is also dangerous because strong tides and complex currents can overwhelm boats in a short period of time. Grytviken was once the busiest whaling station in the Southern Ocean, but today it is little more than a rusting ruin in a remote polar landscape. The settlement was abandoned in 1964 after the whaling industry collapsed, when local whale populations were driven to severe decline. Why do so few people attempt to explore these remains? The first obstacle is a natural blockade of thousands of highly territorial seals that may attack anyone entering their territory. Beyond them, the heavily corroded steel structures have turned the old industrial complex into a maze of potential collapse hazards. The greatest danger, however, comes from deteriorating insulation materials whose dust can become airborne in strong winds and cause serious lung damage if inhaled. Corridor sur Glane is not just an abandoned village, it is a painful scar left by World War II. On June 10th, 1944, Nazi German forces surrounded the village and massacred 642 residents, including more than 400 women and children. Men were taken into barns and shot, while women and children were locked inside the church before the village was set on fire. After the war, French President Charles de Gaulle ordered the ruins to remain untouched as a permanent memorial. Why does stepping into this place feel so chilling? Because rusted cars, ash-covered sewing machines and bullet-scarred walls still remain exactly where they were on that terrible day. The haunting power here comes from a silence so suffocating that anyone who enters is forced to face the brutality of the past. Pripyat is the world's most haunting ghost town, the centre of the worst nuclear disaster in human history. It was once home to about 50,000 residents, but everything vanished after reactor number 4 at Chernobyl exploded in 1986. People left believing they would return after 3 days, leaving behind unfinished meals, children's toys, and an entire city frozen in time. The greatest danger in Pripyat is not only its decaying buildings, but also the invisible radiation that still remains in many areas. Standing in the wrong place can expose a person to dangerous radiation, while old concrete structures may collapse at any moment. According to scientific assessments, some parts of the region are not expected to be suitable for long-term human habitation for thousands of years. Neva Lighthouse is a lonely fortress standing on a rocky outcrop in the violent waters of Russia's Sakhalin coast. Built to operate in extreme conditions, it once relied on a radioisotope thermoelectric generator that allowed the lighthouse to function automatically for years. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the facility was abandoned and gradually became an environmental concern. So, why was this place abandoned? Part of the answer lies in the potential leakage of radioactive material from old nuclear power sources left inside the deteriorating structure. Inside, stairways and concrete structures have suffered severe deterioration after decades of neglect. Reaching a Neva is also extremely difficult because powerful waves and strong winds can throw people into the freezing sea below. In Kolmazgorp, sand does not simply cover the town, it devours it day by day. Giant dunes pour through windows, crawl through corridors, and fill living rooms that once belonged to one of Africa's wealthiest communities. The deeper you go, the clearer the danger becomes. As desert temperatures swing violently, sandstorms can erase direction, and decaying houses may collapse under the weight of compressed sand. In the dark corners beneath the ruins, cobras and venomous scorpions may also hide. What makes it chilling is that this place was once built by the diamond rush of the early 20th century. But when the diamonds ran out, people left, and the Namib Desert was free to swallow Kolmazgorp whole. Hutuan is not just an abandoned village, but a place where nature is slowly swallowing every house on Shengshan Island in China. It was once a prosperous fishing village with thousands of residents, but it was abandoned in the 1990s because its location was too remote and difficult to reach. After people left, vines quickly covered the multi-storey stone houses, turning the village into a green landscape that feels both beautiful and gloomy. However, that fairy tale appearance hides serious danger, as roots and sea air have weakened the brick and stone structures over decades. Old roofs, balconies and walls can collapse at any time under the weight of vegetation. Steep hills, Moss-covered slippery paths and local venomous snakes make exploring Hortuan a risky journey. The Island of the Dolls is not an ordinary abandoned island, but a haunting place hidden in the swamps of Xochimilco, Mexico. According to local legend, after finding the body of a drowned young girl near the island, Don Julian Santana began hanging dolls from the trees to calm her spirit. He continued doing this for 50 years, covering the island with thousands of old torn dolls with lifeless eyes. The isolated swamp terrain, insects, venomous snakes, and decaying structures make the place unsuitable for living. However, what made the island more famous is the belief that the dolls are possessed by spirits and can whisper or move in the dark. After Don Julian died in 2001, the island still attracts visitors, but remains abandoned as a place of residence. Krakow was once a fortified medieval stronghold on a cliff in southern Italy, but today it survives as a ghost town slowly falling apart. After a major landslide in 1963 and a series of powerful earthquakes, the entire population was forced to relocate, leaving behind a stone city abandoned to time and nature. Why has this place become so dangerous that much of it is now restricted? The answer lies in its unstable geology, as the ground beneath the town continues to shift down the hillside. This movement leaves ancient stone houses, cracked walls, and decaying roofs at constant risk of sudden collapse without warning. Because the danger of accident remains extremely high, visitors are only allowed to enter on guided tours while wearing safety helmets. The Principality of Sealand holds the record as the world's smallest self-proclaimed nation with a permanent population that rarely exceeds 5 people. In reality, it is a World War II anti-aircraft fort, standing alone in open water on a steel deck of about 5,900 square feet, roughly the size of 2 tennis courts. Its exterior is an aging steel structure, rusted and corroded after decades of facing the ocean's harsh climate. All living and working space is confined to this small deck. Violent waves can crash directly onto the platform, while storm winds can sweep away anyone who steps out. More dangerously, Sealand must store large amounts of diesel fuel to run its generators, turning the fort into a giant fire hazard in the middle of the sea. The invisible city of Skrunda One now holds the chilling record as the only ghost town in the world turned into a real NATO urban warfare training ground. It was once the Soviet Union's doomsday eye, with a giant radar system scanning European airspace to watch for incoming nuclear missiles. After the Soviet Union collapsed, all 5,000 residents and Russian troops permanently evacuated in 1999, leaving more than 70 empty buildings behind. The danger comes not only from abandoned structures, but also from concerns over electromagnetic pollution and toxic chemicals remaining in the soil and basements. Long corridors and smashed control rooms still carry the heavy traces of the nuclear confrontation era. You should never enter, because trespassing could expose you to serious danger from stray bullets or unexploded military materials. At Kovrinskaya Asia, the most frightening thing is not darkness, but a hospital that was never brought to life. It was once expected to become a pride of Soviet medicine, but construction stopped in 1985 because weak ground caused the basements to flood. With its strange three-wing shape resembling the umbrella logo from Resident Evil, the building quickly became a dangerous maze in Moscow. Inside were unguarded elevator shafts, rusted steel, freezing flooded basements, and scattered debris. Over decades of abandonment, the site also became linked to criminal groups, mysterious cults, accidents, and dark deaths. Although it has been demolished, Kovrinskaya remains one of the most frightening names in Russia's urban memory. Chakhaltaya was once the highest ski resort in the world, located about 17,780 feet above sea level in the Bolivian Andes. Reaching it means travelling along narrow, steep mountain roads and facing thin air that can cause dizziness or quick exhaustion. In the past, the resort depended on an ancient glacier that had existed for about 18,000 years and provided the snow needed for its ski slopes. But as the climate warmed, the glacier gradually shrank over many years and disappeared completely in 2009. Without stable ice and snow, skiing could no longer continue, and the resort lost its reason to operate. Today, Chakotaya is left with a stone lodge, old equipment, and abandoned structures on the bare mountainside. Arkamara is a city swallowed by nature, once a busy coal mining town built for the Soviet elite. Its grand neoclassical buildings now stand abandoned in weeds, making the entire place look like a post-apocalyptic film set. The collapse began with the war in 1992, when the area was besieged for 413 days and residents had to evacuate because food, electricity and water were cut off. After the war, the town could not recover because the coal mines were depleted, machinery was destroyed, and remaining extraction costs were too high. When humans left, venomous snakes, wild boars, and Caucasian bears began occupying the dark ruins. Despite the danger, Ekamara's decayed beauty still attracts urban explorers, photographers, and vloggers from around the world. Body is an almost perfectly preserved snapshot of California's gold rush era. It once held about 10,000 residents and became known for its gold mines, saloons, gambling halls, and the rough lifestyle of the American West. But when the gold began to run out, people left as quickly as they had arrived, abandoning the town behind. Instead of being demolished, Body was preserved in a state of controlled decay, leaving many buildings filled with original objects, from pool tables and bottles behind the bar to children's toys on the floor. This unusual level of preservation helped create the legend of the Body Curse, which claims that anyone who removes an item from the town will suffer a streak of bad luck. Combined with the harsh climate of the Sierra Nevada, and its remote location, Bodie remains one of America's most remarkable ghost towns. Sentu Temple is one of the most isolated and dangerous ancient temples ever built by humans. Perched precariously on a stone pillar, reaching into the sky, it looks like a ruined fortress, forgotten by time. Although it is not completely abandoned as it appears. The extreme terrain makes it almost permanently cut off from the rest of the world. Anyone attempting to reach the temple must climb thousands of steep stone steps and navigate narrow paths right on the edge of a deep abyss. The danger comes not only from the dizzying height, but also from fierce mountain winds that can easily blow a climber off balance. In a place where the line between life and death is so fragile, only those with an iron will dare to step foot. Hashima Island, also known as Battleship Island, is a haunting reminder of the collapse of an industrial empire. Once one of the most densely populated places in the world, with thousands of coal miners, the island was suddenly abandoned in 1974 when oil replaced coal. Within only a few weeks, residents left behind a concrete city isolated in the cold ocean. After more than 50 years of waves and storms, some of Japan's earliest high-rise apartment blocks here are rotting from within. The concrete structures can collapse at any moment, turning dark corridors into deadly traps. Beneath the island, coal tunnels thousands of feet below the seabed are now flooded with water and toxic gas, making any illegal entry extremely dangerous. Known as the world's most dangerous hotel, Frying Pan Tower is a rusting abandoned lighthouse platform standing in the graveyard of the Atlantic. To step onto the tower, you must hang from an aging cargo hoist in mid-air while strong gusts and rough seas surround the structure. Since being abandoned in 2004, saltwater has corroded the steel grating floors and broken many sections of railing, turning every step into a serious risk. With no protection around it, this iron structure takes the full force of major storms and rogue waves crashing directly into its legs. The greatest danger is its height of about 135 feet, where one slip could drop you into the fast-moving water below. Because it sits far offshore and is extremely difficult to access, very few people ever dare to set foot here. Mesa Verde is famous for mysterious stone cities built deep inside the giant rock alcoves of Colorado by the ancient Pueblo people. After more than 700 years of living there, its residents left the area in the late 13th century, leaving villages perched hundreds of feet high on canyon walls. The danger of reaching the ruins comes from unstable wooden ladders, narrow stone tunnels, and paths running close to deep cliff edges. Before the settlements were abandoned, archaeologists found signs of violent conflict and serious resource shortages. Notably, some controversial theories suggest that cannibalism may have occurred during the final crisis period. However, many experts argue that it may have been an extreme response to starvation or dark spiritual rituals, not a cultural feature of the entire community. Glenwood Power Plant is an abandoned power station on the Hudson River, a severely decayed structure that you should not enter without permission. Built in 1906, it was once an important energy centre in the New York area. Although it served an industrial purpose, the plant was designed in the Romanesque Revival style, with red brick walls that make it look more like an old civic building than a power facility. By 1968, outdated technology led to its abandonment as newer and more efficient power plants appeared. Today, the interior contains unguarded pits, flooded basements, and rusted metal that can pose real risks to trespassers. The site is also linked to a long-running rumour that dark tunnels beneath the plant were once used by New York mafia groups to dispose of bodies. The Hill of Crosses is often described as a giant cemetery of crosses where hundreds of thousands and possibly even millions cover a small hill in Lithuania. The tradition began after the 1831 uprising against the Russian Empire, when people placed crosses to honour those who died, but whose bodies were never found. Over generations, more and more crosses were added, planted into the ground, suspended in the air, or stacked together so densely that a large wooden cross can carry hundreds of smaller ones and countless rosaries. The strangest part is that authorities repeatedly cleared the site in the past, yet new crosses kept appearing soon afterward. That process continues today, turning the entire hill into a vast maze of crosses that remains almost impossible to control. Centralia is one of the few towns in the world abandoned because of an underground fire that is still burning today. The problem began in 1962 when flames spread into coal seams beneath the community, gradually forcing most residents to leave. Beneath the town lies more than 1,600 acres of coal, providing fuel that could allow the fire to continue for a very long time. Smoke and gases released through cracks in the ground became one of the main reasons the area was no longer considered suitable for long-term habitation. High underground temperatures can also contribute to ground subsidence and the formation of new surface cracks over time. In 2002, Centralia's zip code was removed and the town largely disappeared from residential maps. Grumman was once the largest Soviet coal mining settlement in the Arctic, tucked beneath the steep slopes of the Svalbard archipelago. In 1961, declining coal reserves and rising transportation costs forced its residents to leave. Unlike the perfectly preserved town of Pyramiden, Grumman was crushed by nature. Its wooden buildings have collapsed and rotted away, leaving only freezing ruins decaying under the heavy snow. Although it is only a few miles from the capital Longyearbyen, the rugged cliff terrain and extreme weather make it an isolated trap. The area is also the hunting ground for polar bears. Combined with ageing mine structures that could cave in at any moment, every wrong step in Grumman can cost you dearly. Fort Alexander I is known as the Plague Fort because it was once used to study some of humanity's most dangerous diseases. The structure was placed in isolation in the Gulf of Finland to separate biological experiments from populated areas and limit the risk of spread if an accident occurred. This remote location left the fortress largely cut off from the mainland, especially in winter when access often required crossing sea ice. Inside, a cast iron staircase leads down to laboratories that once studied plague bacteria and other infectious diseases. A cremation furnace inside the structure was used to destroy laboratory animals and potentially contaminated materials. After decades of abandonment, cracked ceilings, dark corridors, and decaying structures now make the site a serious safety risk. Burj Al Barbas is a failed $200 million mega project that left behind a ghost town filled with identical fairy tale castles. The development was designed as a luxury resort, but financial collapse stopped construction while about 732 villas remained unfinished. Their near-identical appearance creates a maze-like landscape with very few clear landmarks for orientation. Behind the decorative facades are open elevator shafts, deteriorating concrete floors, and unfinished structures that present real safety hazards. Empty basements have gradually become shelter for wild animals and insects. Because the site remains private property involved in legal disputes, unauthorised entry can bring both safety risks and legal consequences. The Sanji UFO village was one of Taiwan's strangest abandoned projects, with futuristic pod houses sitting silently along the coast for decades. What caused a luxury resort planned for wealthy residents to never welcome its first occupants? During construction, a series of fatal workplace accidents fueled stories that the site was cursed. Many believe the project had been built over an old cemetery, and that the destruction of a sacred dragon statue to make way for roads brought misfortune to the development. After being abandoned, unfinished pools deteriorated